Welcome to the Go Reflect Yourself podcast, bringing you real, practical, brain-based strategies to cultivate a life and business full of freedom and fulfillment, starting from the inside out. Working hard and staying busy will only get you so far. To truly become happy, content, and who we are meant to be, we have to move beyond physical capacities and begin to reflect from within. We have to change our thoughts and our mindset into our most powerful assets, transforming you to take inspired action so you can become a better version of yourself and have the life of your dreams.
You are stronger than you believe. You have greater powers than you know.
Welcome to the Go Reflect Yourself podcast. Today, I'm really excited to bring Chris Manning to the table. We have a wonderful conversation in store. Chris is a really important piece of the training that I do, and I've had the pleasure to get to know him a little bit better over the past few months. And to be very honest, his bio is so extensive that I really feel bad reducing it to just a quick summary. But for the sake of respect of time, I kind of feel like I have to. But Chris Manning, Ph.D., was a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army and owner of a venture capital firm. He's excelled as a distinguished professor of finance, real estate, entrepreneurship at many different universities, and also teaches executive MBAs, and undergrads as a professor of finance and as an associate professor. He has co-authored a book that I reference almost every day in the neurocoaching world, but it is NeuroWisdom, the new brain science of money, happiness, and success. And that book was co-authored with Mark Waldman. Chris, I thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Heather, for that nice introduction. It's my pleasure to join you and have an opportunity to share with you how I ended up with Mark Waldman as a very important part of my evolution. Yes, my career is documented and in Who's Who in America and other things. But personally, it's been a journey of personal growth that led to Mark about 10 years ago. Would you like me to tell you a little bit about how Mark and I got together?
I would love that. And that's a perfect segue. I appreciate you talking about your journey. And I do want to point out just very quickly, your background is very extensive, and I really want to highlight some of your accomplishments. So I'll leave it to you to kind of describe, if you'd like to jump into the journey with Mark Waldman and the neurocoaching and NeuroWisdom book, whatever feels good to you to jump right in, because we want to learn all about you.
Well, Heather, I think the best place to start is I'm a highly disciplined person with many, many years of military training, to include being in the United States Army and an Army officer in the war in the Republic of South Vietnam. Now, fortunately, I didn't have to command troops to take new real estate over there. I did have to protect perimeters, but since most of my work was a high-level staff person, I had my evenings off to either drink, like the rest of the officers, the local officers club. But I got bored of that and started reading philosophy books to understand what was important about life. So at a very early age, in the far-off land during a war, I was spending 3 hours a night reading Spinoza, Kant, in order to find out, why is life so valuable? I'm fighting for life.
Wow.
And so I just want to share with your listeners, I come from a very earthy, practical background that led me to learn a lot, a couple of peak experience psychologically along the way. And frankly, after I got my doctorate, after I shopped for lifestyle, which I did about 30 years ago, I was going to teach either psychology or something that maybe I could make more money. So I taught finance. And I had a background in that from my work as a banker and venture capitalist and buying and selling businesses. But I still had a love of understanding human nature. And I met Mark probably about 20, 25 years ago. It was a friend's, and I went to a couple of his workshops. But then after I was one of the administrators starting our executive MBA program at Loyola Marymount, I was frustrated because I was teaching all these quantitative courses and helping lead the program. And I just didn't think it was balanced enough. So I talked the director into including emotional intelligence into another module. And I would love to have taught meditation to my students. And after about 5 or 6 years of teaching them, or actually more like 10, I discovered I was teaching them things from my background of courage and as a leader that made me somewhat of an icon to them. And I realized that rather than just bring in financial executives to talk to the students, why don't I bring in my friend Mark Waldman and just see what happens? Because I thought Mark would just kind of help open them up a little bit.
So these are executive MBA students that you're there to teach them finance and how to be better at their jobs. Is that correct?
Yes, and they thought they were there when they signed up to learn about accounting, finance, quantitative methods, and of course another module about marketing and management.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tried Mark to see what he'd talk about and hoped he'd get more of a touchy-feely psychological influence, because I was already doing that with my students and very, very dedicated to me personally. And imagine my surprise is that one guest speaker evolved into a course at the Executive MBA program that the students would say with a 95% probability that when they started Mark Waldman's neuro leadership class, they thought, why are we wasting our time on something that's not finance and accounting and business-like? And then 95% would say, after they had worked with Mark and become more self-aware and learned about neuro leadership, they then rated his course as the most valuable course and went so far as to say, and this is 95% saying this should be taught in every MBA program across the country, because it's about how to live your life better, which they were interested in doing anyway. But they didn't understand that they needed help balancing family, job, friends, education, and themselves.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you there because we can dissect so many things you just said, but I want to circle back, and I don't want to gloss over the really important thing that you said, which was everything. But first and foremost, as a young soldier, instead of drinking your nights away, which that arguably could be where people find themselves or find out what they're not made of, you had a natural curiosity to start understanding, researching, reading. And what I love about what you said from philosophy, and I like ancient philosophy, and really taking a look at those fundamentals and principles really are the foundation to how to live a well-balanced life. And so you started studying that very naturally. And I'm paraphrasing, so correct me if I'm wrong, And as you continued your career and you were a very successful business person, buying, selling, financing, going through various different types of businesses, you still kept a pulse and an interest in developing as a human, evolving, finding value, finding fulfillment. And then fast forward as a professor to MBA students who are trying to find all the technical components and the edge to be more efficient at their jobs. The thing that they latched onto most was their own emotional intelligence and awareness and how to actually live. Is that a fair summary?
It's a very fair summary. But a part that I need to add to that is it was in Vietnam that I discovered my brain was not what I thought it was. I had what psychologists call a peak experience. And a summary of that is an incredible amount of peace, understanding, insight, and the velocity I could think at increased 1,000 folds. I could imagine a book in less than a second. When I came back from Vietnam, I realized my focus was so powerful that I was able to accomplish things easily and continue to read philosophy and psychology books in the evenings as a way to just enjoy, develop my brain. So imagine my wonderful surprise when Mark Waldman showed up, where I had none of the brain training that he offers in his neuro leadership and neuroscience, and to finally have an understanding. And when we co-authored that book, I was like a student learning about my brain as I was helping him write a business book, because his prior 15 publications were brain books.
Exactly. So again, because I want to pick up on this and highlight the experience that you had. Was it a specific experience, or was it just a discovery that your brain is more, and that with retraining and dedication, you could be more focused and productive with your brain? Or for you, was it something specific? And if you don't want to share details, that's completely okay. I'm just curious if from what angle you mean that you discovered there was so much more.
Thank you for asking. And I have hidden from people a lot of what you're asking about. And I'm very receptive to sharing more, but I do it in layers, like peeling the onion, because I want you to understand what it would be like to be in a war zone in the evening, trying to figure out the meaning of life, and then seeing the dialogues of Plato, where he talked about duality, and realizing that the duality of the world, night and day, the variety versus the unity, exists in such a way that one is in the other. They can't coexist without each other. You can't have good without bad. So it was an early morning before going to work that I was jogging at 5 a.m, and I looked at the dirt as I was jogging. I said, my God, I'm looking at the sky and God. I'm looking at the unity of the world. And I was able to see it in everything. You had a different perspective, and it quieted so much rackets that from that point on, I just didn't have racket, and my mind naturally sought the truth and understanding, and was so receptive to so much that I couldn't have let in, because all of us have this condition from childhood that tells us to be a certain way and love people a certain way, and this is the way we are in society. I didn't have that. My parents were divorced. So I found the spirit within me, and I got back from Vietnam and had to read books to find out what happened to me. And the book that was written back in the end of the 19th century by Richard Buck, called Cosmic Consciousness, where it was traced to the evolution of history with examples of what cosmic consciousness was. And what happened to me can happen to anybody and everybody in some society more. I'm no different from anybody else. I'm just earlier and one of those few people that are fortunate enough that today there are hundreds of thousands of people that are having peak experiences like I'm describing, but they don't talk about it.
Yeah. They
just live it or do something that inspires them. For me, I want to understand it. And that was how I became a student, which ultimately involved teaching.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing that story. And I would imagine you've had a lot of experiences that have contributed to that. It sounds like you're, and this is a question more than a statement, but have a natural curiosity to understand things. Was it that or the situations that you were in to try to be better? Or both?
Both, but let me mention that when I got to understanding the importance of the first brain network, which includes curiosity and the reason you got to bed in the morning, I finally understood that I was drugging myself for free with dopamine by being curious and experimenting. Now, in the practical worlds, if you don't experiment, you don't have options and alternatives from which to even think about, which is a second network. So it's like you have to plant the soil with experience. And so part of my evolution, which I think I mentioned in my last class, was going to different universities every semester practically in order to become broader and learn about how different people live in different parts of the country. I've been to over 5 universities, taught for 3, and curiosity gives us the raw material to think better. And then as we get more experience, our intuition and our emotions, and that's where emotional intelligence comes in. See, it's easy for me now to talk in terms of Mark Waldman's teaching, which is so valuable. That gave me additional peace to say, wait a minute. Okay, yeah, God's here, and it's important to understand how to use God, but how about our brains? Well, God's awareness, that's all it is.
I love that. And just for anyone who's listening or watching, a lot of what Chris is referencing, talking about Mark Waldman, and we actually have an episode with Mark that we did quite a few episodes ago. I can't remember the number, but Mark Waldman is a neuroscience researcher that is dedicated to understanding the brain in a practical way to help us be what I call my mission, to help people be less stressed, more productive, and more fulfilled. And what you're talking about, Mark, coming in and looking at it from the evidence, brain-based perspectives to put these pieces together. So your curiosity helped you as an individual, Chris, to learn that. One thing I want to ask you, because I think you picked up on something incredibly valuable, that curiosity creates experience, creates dopamine, creates the ability to learn more, discover more, start tapping into your awareness. What would you say? Because I know a lot of people, and myself included, as I've gone through some of my personal journeys, but a lot of people look at that as change, and change is scary. Change is bad. And that routine of what's familiar is safer and more comfortable. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
I would be happy to. There is this phrase in the Bible that resonates because I've had spiritual experiences, and also I used to teach. Be a server in a Episcopalian church. I went to Episcopalian school here in Los Angeles for many years. There's also a military school. And the phrase in the Bible is, the truth will set you free.
Mhm.
Well, the truth will also give you peace of mind. We are constantly in our experiences through curiosity and just our second network of the cerebral cortex, logical thinking, trying to sort things out and see what we can trust. We all want to be safe emotionally. What can we trust? Well, it turns out that the more we figure out what's really going on in the world and who people really are, what they're about, the more we can trust how to communicate with them and trust ourselves.
Mhm.
This is all part of awareness, the first pillar. Now, I did this all before I met Mark, but I didn't know there was part of my brain that was doing this for me. So the world seems contradictory because it's so varied and there's so much ignorance. What you do for your clients is what I do for my students, is I help them learn about themselves. I do it in the context of a university so they can have a career that makes money, so they can then live comfortably, to then do personal growth as your client.
Right. And then it's full circle for me to remind them the foundational things you were trying to teach them.
They got to first make money and and be safe in the world physically, and maybe a family, and then they get to the important work, is to have someone, you in particular, that has the art of listening with such unique space that they can hear themselves. That is my skill I did for my students, but I didn't have the guts to go right to being a therapist or a neuro coach or anything. I hid behind my finance knowledge, giving them careers.
It's a gift. I would say you're not hiding behind anything, because you're actually you're integrating yourself in part of an experience, and especially in the academic world, that's so incredibly valuable. That's when people's minds are most receptive, but it's when they need these skills, arguably more than any. These are skills that were, just like you said earlier, we're not taught from these perspectives. And I very much appreciate that you had the courage inside of that institution to say, hey, instead of focusing so heavily on accounting, and my original degree is in accounting, so I can pick on the accountants of the world. I was one, so I can pick on them. But instead of focusing on the numbers and all the things that really stress you out about accounting, let's take a step back and let's take a breath and let's look at what you're doing and why. That's a gift that most people don't have the courage to insert in that context.
Now, it took me to, I'm 75, almost 76, and I didn't start working with Mark directly until a year ago. And it was 10 years ago that I had the courage to bring Mark in and even risk my finance professorial image that knew it all. So I'm a student that is doing personal growth, and it was very hard for me to change. So I will tell you from my experience of going to LifeSpring and Landmark Forum and all these workshops that I used to hang out at, that if I paid for my students at a university to go to these places before they're 30 years old, it didn't work. They didn't have enough life experience. They got something out of it. But the key thing is what you're doing, Heather, is you're working with people that are more experienced in life, like my executive MBAs, which I love the most. Without them, I would never have made the step. And I didn't have the courage to bring Mark in until I worked with older, wiser people at experience that would value you're learning as an accountant and your path, and you're closer to them right now. When I brought speakers in to students for real estate, I didn't bring in the most successful partners that were 70 or 65. I brought in my past students that were around 40 or 45 mid-career, because my younger students and people that were not, closer to them could hear them easier. Yeah. So you are in the perfect place. And I think I got to your age before I realized that what I wanted to do was to help people. And that's why I changed careers and gave up money for teaching. It took me a long time to get to where you are. You got there faster.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And from that, you've brought up money a few times, and I'd really like to highlight that in our society, especially, and I don't need to tell you this, you talk about this every day, and you've gone through this with your students, but we are such a money-driven society where money equals happiness. And yes, there's evidence showing, and you already talked about it, your basic survival and comfort and things like that. But outside of that, there's still a disconnect of happiness, dreams, pleasure, fulfillment. And I know those are all big things that we could really talk about for a very long time. But just from a simple perspective, in your opinion, from people learning about themselves, becoming who they're supposed to be, then following their dreams and passion, does the money follow? Is that a false fantasy?
No. There's books written about Dorothy Sonat. Do what you love and the money will follow. I've read a lot of books about this, and my own experience with my students is that you first have to develop some self-confidence and meet some of society's goals before you're ready to really take yourself seriously to do what you love. And so for most people, just going to college is a huge accomplishment that builds their self-confidence that now they're good enough to go to work and make money. I would say that 5 years out of an undergraduate program is usually enough that a person can start really taking seriously their experience to evolve into what they love. But as I taught it to my students, and for the first 5 or 10 years, it would be evolving through their career to find the career within real estate or within finance that worked for them. What I told people is that my real career is teaching people how to think hard to have the life they want, because we all need experience and thinking skills, which society demands of us before we can do personal growth. I mean, that second network, you just can't relax and wander around and hope that you're going to be disciplined enough to learn what works and doesn't.
Yeah.
You gotta get kicked in the teeth a few times and get a few rewards. And that's what all life's about, is discovering what we really want to do. But the key thing that happens with your clients, because I love the work that you're doing, the key thing to your clients is they have been struggling to fit in society more so than themselves until they get to a safe place to hear themselves. Mm-hmm. Then you can hear them before they do. You get to hear them and give them the curiosity to try and to change and become more aware of themselves. That's what I did in the safety of a university. It paid me money, and they brought the customers in. All I did is deliver them finance and gave them exams. I didn't have to work in the tougher place that you did to be successful of the marketplace where people had all these choices. My students are already stolen a college degree. It was easy.
Yeah, from that perspective, maybe. But I'm, regardless of how you do it, what I'm really hearing you say is you fell in love with the process of being able to provide these additional resources, skills, and tools. And you just happen to do it from the academic side. And you didn't have a path that's that's where your heart wanted to be from the perspective of a goal or money or a profession. You just kept on that curiosity, kept having the experiences, and then fell in love with being able to help your students once you got to that final point, which is why you're doing what you're doing now, which is continuing to help your students grow.
I wish my actual life had been so simple as you described, because frankly, I dropped out of a doctoral program in philosophy because the faculty at the University of California, when I got back from Vietnam, were more interested in publish and perish and not the truth.
Mm.
And I said, well, screw this game. I'm going to play a game, go make some money. So I got my MBA from Northwestern, and through an 11-year career of banking and venture capital and buying and selling business, I became financially independent. And then I thought, wait a minute, life's too short to do something you don't like. So I shopped for career. And that's why it's so important to be curious. I went out and explored everything. And once I found the faculty at another university and looked at their lifestyle, I said, whoa, I was wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe they're interested in publish or perish, but that's a lot easier than meeting a payroll. And then I realized over a lifetime, and the work that we all do is over a lifetime, and you were just helping them at a key moment, as I've had people help me discover that, okay, that trade-off I made before, I'm older and wiser, now it looks different. And I even dropped out of teaching, went back to develop an investment bank in Colorado about 20 years ago, because I wasn't sure that I really loved teaching as much as I did. And it only took about a week and a half or 2 weeks with opening this office and having employees realize, oh my God, I'm going to have to go back to Loyola Marymount in the career I love. So we're constantly exploring and having new experiences that confirm. And we learn at such a deep level through our lifetime. So believe me, what you cast as a simple learning was anything but. I fought it.
And thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it, because I think, again, when people struggle, it's the hills and the valleys. And when you're in the trenches, it's so difficult to see the sunshine and the beautiness of the peak. It's just a far distant thing sometimes that you can't even imagine getting there. But my point to that is, so many times people feel this is a struggle. This is hard. It shouldn't be this way. And that's when sometimes they quit, they give up. But like you said, you've got to get kicked in the teeth a few times to understand what you're made of, what you like, what you don't. And that's not a bad thing. And wouldn't you say that's part of the frustration and the reason these skills are so important is to learn how to get through those quote failures.
That's right. What you're talking about, those negative experiences, those failures, give you the motivation, the incentive, the raw materials to make sense of the world. It's as important as, how would you know the joy of being yourself had you not experienced having gone through the ignorance of pursuing things that didn't work?
Mm-hmm. I have fail as first attempt in learning.
I don't see that you have failed at learning.
Yeah, it's a
Could you?
process, right?
Oh, it is. The learning is uh, learning to me is never a failure. Uh, our conditioning in our brains is such that once we learn something works better, it's all learning. I learned that in Vietnam from the books that I was reading. A life is about learning. There is no sin in the world except not living.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about learning. And at the ends of the rainbow, what we learn is what I talked about in NeuroWisdom as enlightened hedonism. The learning leads us to learning how much we enjoy giving ourselves to others, being of service to others, and being more ourselves so we can feel appreciated. We get a lot out of this. We get appreciated when we're ourselves and we contribute to our people's lives. I mean, I was doing a lot of that, teaching finance and real estate. I just didn't have the courage to risk all that joy of helping people in these academic environments to risk doing something that I wasn't educated to do. So I had to risk and learn that gradually it wasn't a risk. It worked.
And I'm so glad that you took the risk, you had the courage and the dedication to continue learning and exploring. And if there's anything we've gained, that's a huge piece. Let's talk just a quick, if that's at all possible to say quick, but in normal, and I will say normal, whatever that looks like, normal is different for everyone. But our life has shifted significantly this past year. We cannot deny that. This is recording, we're still experiencing the pandemic. We've been in it a year now. Life is going to continue. Stress is always a part of life. And I think this past year, we can all pull a little bit more understanding of human compassion, human kindness, because we've experienced it in various ways. My question out of that is, stress is stress. We're going to deal with it, or it's going to happen. From a brain perspective and from everything that you incorporate, what would you say are things that people need to help them in their whatever everyday life looks like to deal with stress and to avoid that burnout point?
I think what they need is a little bit of learning about neurowisdom. And the key thing is we don't think clearly through negativity, only positivity. There's too many negative things going on in the world that a lot of people get lost in. It adds to their stress, and they miss the opportunity to get a lot of successful reinforcement and dopamine drug, which is free, because there are so many opportunities right now, given the new environment and the hand we've been dealt. People need each other far more than they used to. There was a problem with technology getting in the way of people connecting even before COVID. And now we have Zoom, which is better technology to help us connect like we're doing right now, where you get to see people. But just the people I bump into now that I go back to the gym and work out, my neighbors, people are more receptive. They know they need connection more. They're off their cell phones. They're off their texting, I should say. They're actually talking more on the phone and connecting. We as human beings cannot help but learn from the different experiences that the world throws at us as we naturally strive to be happier, to have more connection, have more love in our lives. And the key thing is, there's plenty of negativity out there. Just notice it and walk away and see it as an opportunity. Just walking away from it's an opportunity. and you succeed, and notice how it feels. My advice to people is become so aware of what makes you happy and pursue it, enjoy it, and that stress is going to melt away.
That's a huge key, a huge, huge key. And I want to make sure that I highlight that tenfold. Be aware and celebrate just walking away. Just that little thing can be a success. That little thing can be a check mark in your brain. That can give you a dopamine rush of, hey, I walked away from this. And what an easy trap. And you're so right with, we'll just say all the things in the world. Negativity is a very easy trap to get into. And our brain wants to keep us protected. So looking at the things that are negative is one way of doing that. So it's really hard to say, no, I don't want to be involved. Be aware, walk away, and celebrate that you did. I love that. Yeah.
And that negativity doesn't have to be any one person's life. We all have the opportunity to speak to the people right around us, interact in a positive way in a grocery store or whatever it is, and be with those things that we've learned are positive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So your book, I have a copy right here that I'm going to hold up. So if you're listening, I'm looking at NeuroWisdom, the new brain science of money, happiness, and success, co-written by Chris Manning, Ph.D., with Mark Waldman. This is what we have referenced and we've talked about a lot. And I, of course, highly recommend it. Like I said, this is one of the key elements I reference every day. This is kind of my secret weapon Bible, if you will, from the neurocoaching world. Are there any other books outside of this one, of course, if someone had this is a tough question, I know, but they just want support. They want a new way of thinking. Is there any other book? You've mentioned a few in your own experience, but I'm curious of what else you might recommend.
There are so many wonderful books that I could recommend and have over the years and given away as Christmas presents. I love to refer individuals to books that work for them because our intuition and awareness needs to grow through what appeals to us, positive things. So I would encourage the listeners right now to walk in a bookstore or wherever they can get access to books, thumb through the recent popular ones. Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People as a classic. I use as a textbook, talking about a map of the world, and ours is always adept to create it. There's just been so many wonderful books. I can't really, I can look above me and look at a few of the books I have, but I'd rather not take our time to do that because they're close at hands. The important thing for our listeners is to explore, and as they read different books, ask themselves every step of the way what they think. Because eventually, if you read a lot of the wisdom in the world from Plato's great. He's a little easier than a lot of the other philosophers. Ralph Waldo Emerson is poetic and one of my favorites people to read and enjoy. But as your listeners read these books, I would encourage them to note that they may think a little differently at that moment and just watch to their own awareness, their own recreation of an accurate map of the truth of the world for them, for their life, and how they want to change.
That's perfect. I really appreciate you saying that, because that's what the whole NeuroWisdom process is about, is having the awareness and connecting to your own inner guidance and intuition to help you make those decisions. Thank you for reminding us that. And I'd like to make an extension of that. One of the things I have become more aware of in my journey, I used to really beat myself up when I would pick up a book and start to read it. I felt this is the accountant part of my brain. I felt I had to read every word cover to cover or I was a failure. That's the pressure I put on myself. And that's part of the reason that a lot of personal development books and that journey did not work for me. And I had to learn that intuitive process. And I had to learn that maybe one book, a certain chapter or something hit me, that now I could sit with that and I could put the book down, or just picking something up at random times. But reading a book cover to cover, sometimes I do still, but most often I don't. But it's okay. It's about me and what my needs are in those moments. And I just felt compelled to share that. A lot of people ask me, what books, what should I read? What's the thing that's going to work? And I really appreciate the way you said that, because it's not really, it's you that's going to work. You just have to help yourself uncover, and the book's just a guide, and it just depends on the moment.
Thank you for the way you expressed that so personally. I couldn't have said it better.
Thank you. Are there any parting words or wisdom that you would like to impart? Chris, we could honestly, there's so many other questions, so many different directions. You have an immense amount of experience and wisdom, and I very much enjoy, and I hate that our time is coming to a close, but I want to honor you and our listeners for being here. Are there any parting words you would like to give us today?
Yes, I'd like to give you a very personal experience. I'd like to share a very personal experience that I've had over the last 50 minutes. And that is, I've done a number of podcasts before, and I have never shared so many personal things about myself from this perspective. And it is something that is a real joy to have such a safe place in your presence, even on Zoom, to be able to share something about what happened in Vietnam. And I think your clients, just like my students, are very lucky when they stumble across you for whatever reason, because the most important thing I want to leave your listeners with today is we all need safety. We all want to feel loved and feel understood and heard in the world. And to have someone that can really listen as well as you listen, Heather, makes people like me, as just demonstrated, share at a level that is unusual that I even learned from.
That means a lot to me. I thank you for sharing that. That absolutely means a lot to me. And this was a gift to me. This time with you today was a gift to me. And I'm honored that you were here and that you feel that way, but that we were able to create this. And I hope that our listeners here were able to pick something up as well. So thank you so much, Chris. I value you, and I very much appreciate that you shared with us today.
My pleasure, Heather, being with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Go Reflect Yourself. Please rate and review this episode. And if something moved you, please feel free to share. For more inspired action or to stay in touch, head on over to GoReflectYourself.com or HeatherJCrider.com. You can also take the growth mindset quiz and learn where your current growth mindset lies. Stay in touch on all social media at Heather J. Crider. Until next time, this is your host, Heather Crider, and I am challenging you to go reflect yourself so you can discover and become who you are meant to be.